All right. Hi, good. No? Yeah. Hi, everybody, and thank you all for being here for the first Black Box Artist Talk for Caribbean Linked 6. And it's wonderful to see you all here. We're really grateful for your support. And before I start, I just want to say a huge thank you to Elvis, I'm giving you recognition, um, to Chrislen, yes, Glenn, to Lupita, and to Annalie and Yao, also known as Holly Bino, who are in Barbados but will be joining us shortly in August. So thank you to the team, and of course, woo, yes, yeah. Thank you to Alexis Trump for this amazing video production. Thank you to Adriano for the sound. And yeah, we have an amazing team here, and we're going to have an amazing residency. And thank you to the artist, the writer, the curator for being here. We're so excited to have you here after nearly 3 years of preparation and planning and pandemics and everything. So thank you for being here. Big up one of selves. So my presentation tonight is gonna basically be broken into three kind of sections where I'm going to speak a little bit about two of the founding organizations of Caribbean Linked, the Fresh Milk Art Platform, where I've worked with Annalie Davis for the past 10 years, which is insane, and ARC Magazine, which is founded by Yawo and has, while it's no longer actively producing work within the region, it's built like such an incredible archive and was a really amazing space for contemporary know that we existed across the ago. So just quick background on both. The Fresh Milk Art Platform is based in Barbados, was founded by Annalie Davis in 2011. I joined her in 2012. I did a residency there, and I tell her that I came and I just never left. That's kind of how I started working there. And similarly with ARC, I had just graduated, came back to the region, found ARC magazine as like a critical space for contemporary art. I reached out, and yeah, I just wanted to be involved ever since. And the same with, I'm getting to you, Elvis. I didn't forget you. Same with Atelier, where the first edition of Caribbean Linked was actually not an artist residency. It was like a meeting and an exhibition. So, Annalie, Yawo, Elvis, a number of invited curators, and they came together in Aruba at Atelier and thought, what does the region need right now for how do we support young emerging contemporary artists who have no shortage of talent. The region is amazing, but just need this kind of opportunity to connect and a fertile environment to meet each other and make work. So that's how the residency component of Caribbean Linked was born. And from Caribbean Linked 2 onwards, it's been love. It's been amazing. Fresh Milk, ARC, and Atelier 89 have worked tirelessly to bring all of these artists to Aruba and to form connections through the work, but also just through being together and living together as Caribbean artists in a space. So I'm going to speak a little bit about Fresh Milk as an organization that I currently still work with. One of the things we offered in our space is local, regional, and international residencies as well. So this is a piece here by a Barbadian artist, Simone Asia, who has also been through the Caribbean Linked program. I'm going to say that line over and over throughout this presentation. But yeah, so again, just offering a studio space to Barbadian artists and also international artists. So here we have Helen Cammock, who's based in the UK, a fantastic artist that worked with us. And I showed this picture because one of the things we ask of the resident artists, we don't say that you have to put on an exhibition necessarily, but we want you to do some form of outreach. So whether it's a talk, whether it's going into these schools, working with the children, we're trying to build an awareness in Barbados and in the wider community of what the artists are doing. And Helen was amazing, and she did this fantastic like photography workshop with these primary school children and donated a set of cameras to them. So just to emphasize that idea of trying to engage with the community in a meaningful way while you're still building awareness of the emerging artists. So I selected this picture, of course. You might recognize this little boy on the end. In 2019, we had Ethan Knowles in residence from the Bahamas, and then we've got two Bajan artists here. We have Kia Redman and Art Ramsey, and this is just again showing how these can be built in so many ways. We often like to have a person in residence at once, to see like what can grow out of these connections and connecting like-minded, talented young people. It does, especially more now during COVID. We've kind of indefinitely put a pause on our residency program because it was difficult. The studio space is small. It's based out of Annalie's personal studio. But we're still trying to maintain a kind of a momentum within the contemporary arts. So trying to find ways of putting now public art into spaces that are like frequented by Barbadians, regularly. So this is a piece here by Mark of the project in 2014, but recently we've been putting benches and bus shelters into the space in Barbados, and putting contemporary art on them, adding a QR code, adding information so that people are beginning to see diverse ideas of what art can be outside of like what is often associated with the region, more stereotypical work. And this is just an example of some more of the artworks that have gone on benches over the years. And another thing we do when we have the means and opportunity is host small exhibitions and small events. So this is great because that was an exhibition and a public talk that we held for the launch of a book called See Me Here, out of Trinidad, a Robert and Christopher Publishers book that was looking at self-portraiture as a practice in the Caribbean. So we were able to hold like a local launch, and have, bring the community together, bring some of the artists in the show together, and still expose people to the work. Another public art intervention that we do, this billboard is at the corner of the road that leads to where Fresh Milk is. Fresh Milk is based on a dairy farm in rural St. George in Barbados, and this billboard was on the corner of the road doing nothing. So we were able to get access to it to start putting, again, like these contemporary pieces in the public sphere. So this is a piece by Barbadian artist Ronald Williams. And then we also had a piece by Martinique-based artist David Gums that was, really quite beautiful, and we were able to have it illuminated at night. And that's the first time we had a regional artist on our Fresh Milk artboard. So that was really special too. So now I'm going to talk about a program called Caribbean Linked. We'll talk a little bit about this. I told you about how Caribbean Linked was born, essentially. So now I'm just going to show you some images of the beautiful people that have passed through the program since, I believe this was 2013, when Caribbean Linked 2 happened, and we were able to really get things going. So we've got, artists here. Like we have a writer from Jamaica, we have artists from Martinique, Curacao, Trinidad and Tobago, Aruba, Barbados, Suriname, like going through the motions, the Bahamas, Puerto Rico, that edition. So, that was kind of our first step into this space of how do we bring artists together. We all know how difficult travel is in the region. We all know how difficult speaking to one another is. And it was kind of an experiment, and we just saw how important it was and how well it worked. And so from there on, we knew we're going to try to keep this going. So this is a group picture from Caribbean Linked 3. Everybody's having a good time. We also, we encourage people in the program to, as with all residencies, try to experiment a bit. So we had our first public art piece by Jamaican artist Laisho Johnson that edition. an exercise in what we were allowed and not allowed to do in the public space. But again, we're trying different things, and we're trying to create um, safe spaces, experimental spaces where artists can just be themselves in the region and create that dialogue with the Aruban public, and by extension, the rest of the Caribbean, by live streaming talks like this, and archiving everything on our website to try and keep that awareness going. So I've been told that whenever I show this group picture, I'm not allowed to show the version from the front. I'm only allowed to show the version from the back. So I'm sticking to that so I don't get told off. But this is a group picture Caribbean Linked 4. And this was the first edition that I was here for the entire time in person, and was actually really able to feel that energy and bond firsthand before I was doing all the website work from Barbados. But again, I came and I kind of never left. That seems to be what I do. So this is work that you'll also recognize. This is by Haitian artist Tessa Mars. It's the beautiful image that we have on our Caribbean Linked 6 t-shirts. And this is, again, work that was done in this residency space, inspired by Aruba, inspired by Aruban society, social politics, and the landscape. So it's also these tours that we do and these short walks through Arikok, it's it's really here so that you get a feel for this space as quite a different kind of landscape than a lot of us are used to in the Caribbean. And it kind of, we see that it really does tend to influence what people want to make here. And this is a piece of an installation by Laura DeVogo, another artist at Caribbean Linked 4. Had the honor of seeing her exhibition today. We're going to hear more about it tomorrow as well from Ana Maria Hernandez, curator. Very excited. But no, again, just this image is interesting because Laura talks a lot about in having, what goes on behind closed doors or behind of us in the region identify with when we come here, because then we get to kind of lift that facade and realize that this is happening all over the archipelago. This is Caribbean Linked 5. This happened in 2018. We thought the next one in 2020, but here we are. And then this is a piece by Gladys Gambi, an artist from Martinique, who does really beautiful work. The links between the artists that happen in this space. She collaborated with Trinidadian graphic designer and kind of social activator Kristen Chen, who teaches stilt walking classes and tried to get us all on stilts during the residency. Really succeeded with this, and it really transformed this particular character that she embodies in some of her work. So seeing really beautiful interactions, and also this kind of like lasting kind of mark that we try to leave respectfully on the Aruban community. For example, this is a mural by Irvine Aguilar, who was one of our artists and did this really huge, beautiful mural along a wall in Main Street, Calle Grande, that was inspired by the history of Aruba. Irvine, he's invested in this space, and he kind of made this like interesting and thoughtful tribute that looks at the history of the island, and it's again a way of like interacting with a wider public community. It was stunning and gorgeous, and we had so much respect for him going up on that like little forklift every day to like, yeah, you guys know what the Aruban sun is like. So I'm going to talk just quickly about a couple other programs that Fresh Milk does, and then I'll talk about my work. I promise. I've been told some people here didn't know I made work, so we're gonna dive into that too. But I wanted to mention this program, Transoceanic Visual Exchange, or TVE, as another collaboration that Fresh Milk does, where every edition we try to work with an art space based in a different region. So the first TVE, we worked with a space based in Nigeria and a space based in New Zealand. The second one, we worked with a space out of Australia. Third one, we worked with Alice Yard in Trinidad in collaboration with a space in Beijing, China. And the last one that got kind of interrupted by COVID, we worked with a fabulous platform in Costa Rica called Theoretica. And just again to talk about the kind of overlaps that happen when you reach out to your community. You know, we've shown work by other Caribbean linked artists such as Onika Russell from Jamaica, that her piece that she created in Aruba was then selected as part of TVE. You know, and this is a piece by Trinidadian artist Shanice Smith, who also was part of Caribbean Link 4 and whose work then traveled to Barbados and to Australia out of this like kind of desire to keep working together. Okay, we're gonna transition into Catherine Kennedy, artist now. This is a very early piece of mine. It's about 10 years old now, but I tend to start with this when I speak about my own practice because it was kind of the turning point of me, like really kind of figuring out the kind of visuals, the aesthetics, and the kinds of themes that I was really drawn to. So this is a piece that I did while I was studying in England, and like almost the entire very focused on feeling displaced, trying to figure out my place in the UK as somebody who, you know, was born, raised in Barbados, lived there my whole life, and suddenly thrust into a very different space. And something I realized that I was missing, as you know, in some ways it's a bit of a stereotype, but in other ways it's very true, is kind of color and vibrancy, and just something about the environment that I think a lot of Caribbean people can connect with, but that felt a bit devoid. Sorry, you know, UK, but it was very gray. It rained the whole time, and so I was trying to find ways to speak about that aesthetic, that kind of gray aesthetic, but like try to bring back some of the visuals or imagery that I associate with home. So this Carnivalesque inspired sculpture, but you know, kind of then it was completely desaturated. The vibrancy was kind of removed from it, and it's entirely made from kitchenware. So again, like kind of referencing home and food and comfort and like where your community is. And from there, I also started experimenting a lot with these other like domestic or household objects, and then bringing ideas of like light and shadow into it. So it kind of became looking at what's happening. There's what you see, and then there's the shadow. There's what's happening behind the scenes. So those are some themes that have carried on through my work, as well as looking at ideas of creations that were connected both to my culture or my feeling of belonging, but also the unfamiliar spaces that I found myself in. So kind of I started making these strange, even know yet, out of shredded clothes from thrift stores, or like, you know, recycled kind of things I was finding in these spaces, and then trying to kind of implant these into different, which carried on to a residency that I did in 2013 after graduating at Vermont Studio Center. With this one, I think it was a very similar concept, but I became a bit more focused in the fabrics that I was choosing, as opposed to just thinking about color. In thrift stores, there were so many like tropical print shirts. Like, you know, it wasn't cute. It's the kind of things that you buy when you're on holiday, and then you're like, you get home and you realize you're never gonna wear this again, and you donate it to a thrift store. And it started to make me think some more about that connection to the commodification of the region, and the way, you know, people from abroad can sometimes see us as disposable or as not a real place. And, you know, they come for the vibrancy and the prettiness, but then, you know, they leave and donate it. They're not really thinking about the ongoing relationship that the people in a space have with their own country. So this was just some more experimentation with that. And at the same time I was doing that, I was also continuing to work with the kind of domestic objects, kitchenware, and the idea of reintroducing color into a space. Now that I was back home, starting to like figure out a whole new way of relating to your island, because I think everyone can relate to that. You leave and you miss home, then you come home and you realize that you're changed by what you've seen and like the experiences that you've had. So again, bringing light and shadow at each of these panels on these like frame covers have the silhouette of a building that I saw in like various places I had traveled, the ones on top. And then on the bottom, those are lines traced from maps. It's a very specific radius or circumference, where I was trying to map basically the 21 miles long that Barbados was onto these different spaces, and then taking the images, getting them, having the shadows kind of play on the walls behind the work. So, and even though they're map lines, they start to look like webs, they start to look like veins or networks, and that was kind of the beginning, I guess, more biological kind of aesthetic or vibe as well that has been coming into play in my more recent work. This is meant to be a video. I won't spend too long going to play today, but you can go to my website to watch the videos, kathkennedy.com. But again, this was a piece I did in Vermont Studio Center. It's a video where this steamer opens and closes repeatedly and becomes like encrusted in jewels. And then at the end, we've got this very bright kind of paper pasted on that was actually cocktail umbrellas that I found again in a thrift store and just like deconstructed. So jumping backwards again, to go back and forward a lot in my practice because I return to different processes at different times and it tends to mean different things. But while I began the process of beating fallen leaves during autumn, because again, in this kind of weird displaced self in, I was trying to take things that other people were seeing as mundane or not particularly interesting and like trying to kind of encrust them or give them value, but at the same time, it's a fake sense of value because these are just plastic beads that I'm imposing onto a space as well. And when I came back to Barbados, I explored taking that same process and materiality, but thought about how much the context changes just by changing, because beating a fallen autumn leaf is different to me than beating a palm leaf, because the palm leaf then is a symbol of, tropicality, beauty, the kinds of things that we're fighting against as stereotypes in the region. And it's essentially covering the natural space of it with something very synthetic, but in some ways beautifying it, but also removing its natural beauty. So as you see, I've kind of been shifting from more, even though the organic shapes were always there, from carnivalesque or like more synthetic forms into combining the organic and the inorganic in my work. And I think what I'm leaning towards now is this attempt to create a new kind of set of environment. So this was the beginning of a project is called Invasive Species. I created this work while I was at a residency in Barbados presented by Punch Creative Arena. And I was really taking that idea of looking at man-made objects and natural objects and this kind of paradise image or tropicality that's imposed onto us, and finding ways to create new species or new environments out of that. And one of the materials I'm using here are tampon applicators, which I had been collecting for quite a while because I knew I wanted to use them in my practice. I thought that, there's something quite bizarre about how pretty they make them, considering that it's a one-off use and then, nobody sees it. And I just thought that they almost lent themselves to this kind of organic, inorganic, invasive, crossing a natural boundary kind of aesthetic I was thinking about. But I collected them for a long time. I wasn't sure when to use them because some of our societies are quite conservative, even though there's nothing to be ashamed about when it comes to these things. And I think I just kind of reached a point where I was like, yeah, I can use them because it made sense for the work. This is another piece that's leading up to the video works I've done most recently, where in addition to beating leaves, I began beating shells. Originally kind of still looking at that idea of covering something synthetic, but I've recently been like trying to read more like the symbolism behind shells and the kind of history that they have across a lot of cultures. So that's kind of a new direction I've been working on. But for now, this piece was called Subjective Lens, and it was, you know, bringing the map lines and the kind of weird veiny imagery back into it. But the title was given because the objective lens of a microscope, you know, that's what magnifies a sample or a specimen. But I feel like often the lens that's put onto the region is subjective and so colored by outside opinions. So, you know, it's this kind of putting these strange shells to make these strange creatures that you're observing, but at the same time, you know, the piece is kind of observing you back through these holes and through this web, which is the same map patterns that I used before. So this was another video. I'm sorry that this one can't play tonight either, but kathkennedy.com. So in using the individual shells, yes, them as objects, but something that I wanted to incorporate is movement back into my work. Something I experimented with a bit, but I wanted to play with the idea that these shells or these creatures were actually like kind of living, breathing organisms. So these first pieces that I made with the shells, where I photographed each one individually and then created some stop motion videos of the shells kind of moving in this like hypnotic kind of kaleidoscopic way, and then slowly the image fades back into the shell being natural. But when the shell is natural, it's static, it's no longer moving. It's, you know, it's kind of a reversal of what something that is alive and natural should look like. So these were called biorhythms, thinking about that whole life cycle idea. And this piece was called Enmeshment. And this and the next video that I'm going to show, they were done during the pandemic. So, you know, again, you had a lot of time indoors to reflect and to do very tedious stop motion animation because you can't go anywhere. So this was a more involved kind of process, but again, looking at the way the shells move and interact with one another, and then bringing imagery from the sculptures that I had made that looked kind of like webs as well, covering it at the end. And the word enmeshment is a term in psychology that talks about unhealthy symbiotic relationships. So again, thinking about our difficult reliance on tourism, we're kind of stuck in this enmeshed relationship, which in part during COVID as well, and left us even more vulnerable. These are just some more examples of the kinds of works that I've intervened physically into spaces. So we'll see again the return of the tampon applicators, and, you know, using like coat hangers, wire, repurposed material. A lot of my like older clothes that are my own old clothes now that I'm recycling into the artwork. And this was a commissioned show by a place in Barbados called the Flower Forest, where a group of, I think it was 6 artists, were asked to come and intervene into the space. And I thought it was, you know, it was good because Flower Forest is a beautiful space, but it's also a manicured space. It's also very intentional in how it portrays tropicality. So I felt like these organisms would grow their sense. I will crop out the web or the main part of the image and then overlay that into the videos, which you will. This is creatures. And then I had a creature within my creature that is not the best quality photo, but I liked that I caught it. And Yeah, the last video piece, again, similarly to enmeshment, is called Plexus. Um, so this was the height of the pandemic again, and I was just feeling again very smothered and claustrophobic. So this piece has a lot more of that kind of webbed imagery and showing how we kind of get we get trapped in these processes of like our own bodies, of our own homes, but the idea of a plexus or like a system of nerves or something that keeps you connected and keeps you functional. Those were the kinds of ideas I was drawing on, as well as thinking about like the solar plexus as like a chakra for expression and how a lot of our expression was silenced over the last 2 years. Last project I'm going to touch on really quickly that kind of just came to fruition last week when I was invited to Seattle with my friend Shanice Smith, also part of Caribbean Link 4, and her partner Joshua Cabral. The three of us kind of somehow managed to form a collective recently around the idea of food, which, again, to throw back to what I was doing 10 years ago and looking at the kitchen and the idea of home, continue to make a lot of sense. And just based on experiences of traveling, of dealing with different cultures and then like different ideas of how you show care and how you feed each other as an act of care. That's where this collective came from. That's a Trinidadian kind of dialect word that has evolved from the French word kusum, and it's looking. The word itself means when you let something sit and simmer and marinate and let the flavors come out. And I think that's kind of what we're doing with this collective is creating these experiences in collaboration with spaces. So in Seattle, we collaborated with a space called Wanawari, and we talked to them about the history of their space, about why they do what they do with the community, and then we build a menu around that. Joshua, big up Joshua, comes and serves, cooks and serves the food, and then we have these kinds of like intimate conversations with members of the surrounding community. So this is the second collaboration we've done, and we're hoping to do many, many more. And I think that is it for me. Yes. Thank you. Sure. If anybody has any questions, they're welcome. Oh gosh. Oh.
Hey, I get to go
Ariel.
first. First of all, I want to say shout out to Rambo for taking the photo.
Whoop, whoop.
Rambo is a local legend.
Best Arcot Ranger.
Yep, hands down. Can you go back like a few slides? Just because for the that one.
Mhm.
So when did you make this one?
This one I completed in 2021.
Okay, so like last year.
Mhm.
Is it the first time where, because this was the first one I noticed where there was the shells and then the series with
Yeah,
the
kind of.
Disposable. Is this
Yeah.
the first time that you've meshed the two worlds together?
Sort of. There's kind of a hint, and like there's a part of the applicator present, but it's
Mhm.
not. It's like the bottom part of it is not like as identifiable immediately. But yeah, in this one, it was intentional to show those two themes. Yeah,
The two
colliding.
created kind of
Mhm.
coming together.
Yeah.
Can you go back to?
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry,
No,
not to
no.
boss you around. Yeah. So when I look at this one, I think that what I see is the melding of not only your experience as a person, but also the culture around you. So I just wanted to know if when you made this digital piece, right?
Mhm.
Were you contemplating on your society or your experience in your society?
Definitely both, and that's something I've realized over the years. I'm getting increasingly like mixing the personal with the societal. So yeah, speaking about things like the tourism economy and commodification, but also speaking about it more from, as you say, my perspective. As a woman, as a Caribbean woman, as like taking my experience and just trying to like find my place, which I guess goes back again to the original origins of my work where I was feeling very displaced. So yeah, it's always this kind of give and take where I don't want to get overly personal that it's no longer speaking to a wider group of people, but at the same time I think a lot of people can relate to the things that I go through as a woman in Barbados in the Caribbean.
Cool. Also, I think it's visually stunning, the way that it really draws your attention. And I think that it's a really strong abstract piece that shows not only like technologically, like digital work, and also because you made the original ones and took photos of them, right? So it's just a really cool process. And I think that, yeah, I like it. So
Thank
I
you
just
very
wanted to shout it out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And yeah, when you see the video as well, you'll you'll
Thank you.
also see those things colliding some more. So
So I had a question about the beaded leaves. I was wondering if you could speak more to about like a step-by-step process, because I have no idea how you could bead a fragile autumn leaf. So I wanted to hear more about the actual steps you took in creating that work, and how you came, or how the idea came to you, or what experiences or thoughts prompted that work.
I mean the process itself, so there's conceptual and practical reasons I moved to shells, right? Shells can take the beads a lot easier, but they still do the job of what I want them to do. But even just the process of using the leaves, just trying to find ways to preserve them, pressing them or like covering them in resin or PVA first to try and make them a little bit more substantial. And then the beading, the beading itself is each bead I apply with a needle, not sewing them in, but a layer of the glue or adhesive, and then I apply each bead with a needle to get it in the place I want. People have watched me do this and wonder what's wrong with me, and that's fine, that's fair. But yeah, I think there is something about labor-intensive processes that also really draw me. And drawn to the leaves in the first place because seasons just kind of blew my mind. I know that's a little bit like cheesy to say,
I feel you. I feel you.
It's like, yeah, we have seasons in the Caribbean, but the landscape or in Barbados as well, the landscape doesn't change so drastically throughout the year that you're like, this is summer, this is winter, this is autumn. And I was just, I was really fascinated by my surroundings and my environment, and I wanted to find a way to incorporate it. So I started collecting the leaves, and yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
I was really interested in you combining the tampon applicators and the shells. I was wondering if you from what you've presented, you seem to focus more on the applicator and the shell and not what was in it previously. And I'm thinking that both of these things are meant to protect something that is very fragile or is meant to remain sanitary to be of use. And I was wondering if you made that, if it's something you contemplate on as a reflection of what you mentioned early in the presentation, your position when you travel to England, when you travel to England, and being kind of this not fragile, but this
vulnerable position,
sanitized
sanitized environment, and you're in a vulnerable position within it. And
yeah. You didn't speak to that specifically, but I was wondering if that is something you think about in your work.
Yeah, I think definitely this idea of, well, firstly, even with beading the shells itself, it's almost like, yes, it's pretty, but you're also kind of encrusting it with an armor. So I do think kind of this idea of like adding a layer of protection. So yes, it's a facade. Yes, it's pretty. And yes, we often project ourselves in a particular way in the region, but it's not only about commodification. It's also kind of like an armor that we put on to just like to deal with certain things within our society, within our culture. Because sometimes it's easier to have that facade on the outside than it is to really investigate what's inside. So that definitely goes through my head. And again, with the applicators, it's kind of this idea of, the plastic or the synthetic material that crosses a very natural boundary. It's like actively, invading, but as you say, at the same time, it's something it's something that is we're doing within our body because it's a necessary process in however you choose to deal with that. So yeah, there's this idea of what's sanitized or what's invading versus what we're actually using out of necessity.
And going down the rabbit hole a little bit further, and kind of looking at the similarities and differences again with the tampons and the shells, we kind of treasure an impurity in a clamshell, which would result in a pearl.
Yep.
But a used tampon, you need to dispose of it immediately.
Yeah.
And just thinking about the relationship between the animal, how we treat the animal's output and how we treat the human output. Just throwing that. You don't have to respond to that, but this is the rabbit hole that you sent me down with your
I
work.
love it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll look at the website also for the videos. And I was following the thread of the bead relationship. I was thinking about not only the material relationship or like what's been pointed out in terms of its materiality in relation to the shell and the beads themselves, but also how beads are used frequently in different cultures in like ritual or trance-based processes, whether individual or collective. And I was also thinking about that performative aspect of your relationship to those material processes, which is not only in terms of the symbolic relationship of the materials, but of your engagement with it as well, like in the kind of like process that it brings you or connects you to. And yeah, just like another layer. There's the Virarica, or also called Huichol, art in Mexico, that it's using glass beads, usually stuck with cera de Campeche. I don't know how to, it's a kind of natural wax.
Okay.
That's the kind of like glue.
Oh,
And
nice.
but I'm kind of like thinking more about the, yeah, again, kind of like the meaning of engaging in that process yourself of beading as another layer that kind of like creates a different connection to the materials also. And if you can talk a little bit about that.
We will definitely talk about that. Thank you.
Very interesting work.
Thank you.
I really like the mixed materials that you use. I think it's very, very interactive, and also it involves movements. I enjoy expressing myself in movements. I quite enjoy that as also.
Thank you so much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Krishna? Thank you again, everybody, for coming out. And I'd just like to remind you that this is the first of many Black Box Talks that we're having for Caribbean Link 6. So tomorrow evening at 7 p.m., we are going to have two great presentations by Aruba-based curator Ana Maria Hernandez, who's going to speak about her work and with Plataforma and the exhibitions that she's been putting up in collaboration with Casti Cultura. And we're also going to have our curator in residence, Sofia Olascoaga, who's going to speak more about her practice and her kind of social engagement and what we were learning is a very multidisciplinary approach to how she works as well. So tomorrow at 7 p.m. we'll be live again on Facebook and YouTube. And if you're in Aruba, please come through. Thank you.